Attorney General Nick Brown runs the largest public law firm in the state. His office has a broad range of responsibilities. Among other things, he represents the state in court. He advises state officials on the law, and he enforces the state's Consumer Protection Act.
And Nick is the first new person to have this job in the past 12 years, and he's with us live in the studio here at KIRO Newsradio. So, you're with us. You were fist pumping about the Mariners game. Were you watching? Were you there?
No, I wasn't. I was actually traveling yesterday, back from Tennessee.
Certainly you've seen the highlights.
I've seen the highlights.
And you approve.
I was pulling for him. Great win. Clutch hitting by Julio and others. It was great.
Yeah. So let's talk about your first 3 months on the job. How is it going? What's it been like for you?
Well, just kind of slow and boring for the first 3 months. It's been great. I always tell my team it's so fun to be in a job where you walk in and everything you're doing has importance. It impacts people's lives. It feels like it's weighty and significant, and I'm loving the job. Really proud to be part of that team. It is the largest law firm, not only in Washington, but the second largest on the West Coast. So we have so many dedicated public servants that are just trying to make this state a better place to live.
How do you hope to affect people's lives in the coming year?
Well, we represent both all public agencies, those departments, boards, commissions, et cetera, but we are the people's lawyer. So it's our job to make sure that we're looking out for their rights and advocating on their behalf when it comes to civil rights, environmental protections, consumer protections, antitrust issues. And I just want to make sure that we have the best possible law firms so we can best serve the public. There are so many challenges we have in this state, both in how we provide advice to our client agencies and how we advocate for the people. And we have a lot of opportunity to really have an impact.
Your office has been part of several challenges against the Trump administration the past few months, and a lot of your constituents are clearly happy with you doing that. We have people listening on both sides of the aisle to this show who some would say, I'm not glad he's doing that. What do you want both sides to know?
Well, I don't necessarily try to reflect what people try to make people happy about the cases that we're doing. My job and my oath is to defend Washington law. I made an oath to defend our Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. So every time that we're looking at a potential legal action against any federal administration, we first say, does this break the law? Are Washingtonians harmed? And are we the right venue to bring those challenges? And if those three things match up, then we will bring those cases. And unfortunately, we've seen time and time again where the president of the United States and his administration is breaking the law, is harming Washingtonians, and we are the right venue to bring a lot of those cases. And so I understand that does not make everybody happy. My job is to enforce the law. I try to take a very objective look at that and make sure that we can defend people. But if President Trump or any other president is breaking the law and harming Washingtonians, I have an obligation to defend those laws, and we're going to do that.
As we know, everyone is struggling with budgets these days. How are these challenges paid for?
Well, most of our affirmative litigation is paid for through our work with going after consumer protection cases and antitrust. The AG's office is actually the only budget generator in the state, the only agency that raises revenue. When we sue a company because they violated some consumer protection laws and they pay back the state, we make money on behalf of the state of Washington. So all of our affirmative litigation, including our litigation against the Trump administration, is paid through that affirmative fund. It is not through an allocation through the legislature.
And I know a lot of your staff is nervous about potential cutbacks. There was a walkout last month. And we just had this sound from the state capitol yesterday with public workers. Just give us an idea of where budget stands for you, just in general, and any cutbacks that you're forecasting.
Well, obviously, the state is facing a really significant budget hole, and that is a big challenge for the legislature and for the governor to try to find ways to make cuts and raise revenue to fill that hole. But some of the proposals that were on the board earlier this session would have a devastating impact on our agency. We're talking about furloughs for state workers. We have many employees who are dual state worker families, and so it's not just a furlough for one person, but maybe for both people that are trying to raise their families. We have cuts to our general fund budget, which would cut back on the criminal justice work that we do. We have a lot of our prosecutors in office trying to keep communities safe and work with local prosecutors across the state. Cutting that fund would mean we would just do less of that work. And so I'm really hopeful that the legislature finds a way to get the necessary funding to make sure that they're not cutting the services that Washingtonians have come to expect. You talked about how happy many people in the state are with some of our affirmative litigation. If you cut back our budget or if you furlough state workers, it just means we're not going to be able to do that. And I don't think we should try to balance the budget on behalf of state workers.
Do you have any concrete numbers on potential furloughs?
Well, the proposal from the governor was, I believe, 1 day a month for 2 years for all of state government. One of the House and Senate budgets are a little different, and they haven't finalized those. Obviously, I don't want to get this wrong. The Senate budget did not furlough state workers, I believe, and the House did, although at a reduced amount. I'm hoping they don't have to furlough any state workers. And we talk about what that might mean. It's not just an employee who takes a day off. In my office, it means an employee who's not serving the public. We have all these child welfare cases where we're trying to help our agencies reduce the harm that's happening to foster youth and other people that depend on our services. If you furlough state workers, that just means there's not a state worker available to do that work on behalf of that child or behalf of that parent. And that's the impact that we want to try to avoid.
And does that mean then if there are cutbacks, if there are furloughs, you might not be as able to file lawsuits against the federal government?
Well, we'll have to see what those cuts might mean, but certainly that's a potential. If you cut back at a significant amount, it just means I'm going to have less employees to bring these cases. And I don't want to do that. I think there are other opportunities for the state to balance our budget without cutting back workers, because those workers provide services. And that's, we've grown the agency significantly over the last 10 years or so, but that work has paid for itself and time again, and we don't want to reduce that ability.
As we mentioned, you're relatively new to the role. What have you learned that maybe you didn't expect?
I was really familiar with the agency. I was Governor Inslee's counsel for 4 years. I was a special assistant AG from time to time as in private practice. But I don't think I fully grasped the full scope of the work that we do. I have 830 lawyers that work for the state. We have 13 offices across the state. There are people all across Washington who are showing up every day to try to serve the public. And the variety of work that we do is really surprising to me, even though I was really familiar with it. A lot of people focus on the affirmative litigation. When you sue the president, it makes a headline. But we have hundreds of workers and thousands of cases happening at any given time. And that's one thing I would love for people to remember. As much as they pay attention to these high-profile cases in their news, there are thousands of cases that we are working on a day-to-day basis. The Trump litigation is not our primary focus, and I think that's really important. It's surprising to me, even though I was familiar with it.
Can we talk about consumer protection for a minute? Because that's a big aspect of what you do, and I don't think a lot of people know they can reach out to your office. What do they need to know?
Well, consumer protection is probably our one of our most important divisions in the agency. It is the agency that most directs people. So we are very weary of companies or organizations that are lying to the public. If you go in and you're promised a certain price and it turns out there's hidden fees that weren't disclosed, or if you have a company that's misleading seniors and veterans and vulnerable populations, we want to know about that. And so if you go to our website, you can file a consumer protection complaint. You can get that feedback into us, and we can investigate and bring litigation if necessary to try to resolve that from happening ever again.
And I heard from one person, they wanted me to ask you about state government lawsuit payouts. My understanding is those had been growing under AG Ferguson. Are you in your office doing anything to help reduce those payouts and the costs that are associated for the state?
It is a real serious problem, and it's been growing for a very long time, even predating AG Ferguson, now Governor Ferguson. But we pay hundreds of millions of dollars in liability in lawsuits every year. And, part of the budget challenge we have, I think, is driven in part by that. And, part of our job is to work with our client agencies to reduce harm for these cases to ever happen. We are a litigating agency, but I don't want to just come in at the end of the problem. I want to help our agencies prevent those problems from happening. So I have talked to our team repeatedly in the last 3 months about how do we increase our problem-solving skill set? How do we work with our client agencies to reduce harm from ever happening to begin with, to reduce that? There are going to have to be a more serious look about how do we prevent these harms from happening across all of our agencies, because that budget hole created by some of these lawsuits is really significant.
Attorney General Nick Brown, we certainly appreciate your time. We're almost out of time, but we learned you're a Mariners fan. Sully's over there watching the Masters. Golf fan too?
I'm not a golf fan, but I'm really hoping that Rory can pull it together. I feel like it's his time. I don't think I can probably name more than 10 golfers who are playing this weekend, but I'm a sports fan, and I'm really pulling for Rory. I don't know how he's doing.
Perhaps
so far.
I should ask you about how my $75 parking at the Mariners game last weekend turned into $95 when the sign said 75.
I think you should file a consumer protection complaint.
I wasn't sure if I could do that. The taxes and fees part of that sign was so small. I did not see that.
And I'll mention it to the mayor next time I see him.
Yeah.
Attorney General Nick Brown. Nick, thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much. Go Ams.